Welcome aboard the Pilot Money Guys podcast, where our mission is to help professional pilots build and protect wealth on their journey to financial freedom. This podcast is brought to you by Leading Edge Financial Planning.
Welcome to the Pilot Money Guys. We're glad to have you. I'm your host, Charlie Mattingly, and we are super excited about today's show. So first, I just want to thank everyone, though, our pilot tribe for listening in. We really appreciate it. Our goal here is to bring value and entertainment on the financial front. So today, we're super excited about our guest, pilot, author, Jack Stewart. So you're really going to enjoy this one today. And he's written some really cool Tom Clancy type books, that genre anyway. So But before we get into our interview today with me and Kevin, the professor, and Jack Stewart, I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the Pilot Wealth Index, and check that out wherever you're getting your podcasts from, whether it be iTunes. Just pick up your phone. You can look at this podcast. There'll be a link right there that you can access that Pilot Wealth Index. It's just a series of questions for people to say, "Hey, am I on track?" That's the most common question we get. Am I doing the right things to make sure that when I'm done with the airlines or my fractional corporate flying job that I'm ready to go, and obviously the airlines has that mandatory, as of now, age 65 retirement. So you want to make sure you get one shot at this. So otherwise, call us as well, email us. You can email me at charlie@leadingedgeplanning.com with any comments or questions, but check it out and tell us what you think about it. We also appreciate any reviews, ratings and reviews on the podcast as well. That really is helpful to get the podcast out to more people. So for today's show, again, fun interview with Jack Stewart, Navy Top Gun guy. We'll get into his bio more in a minute, but we've known Jack for a while. So it's been fun to watch him on this journey of publishing books. But before that, I wanted to share with you a short little article from Jason Zweig, and that is spelled Zweig, Jason Zweig. He is a Wall Street Journal financial columnist, and I highly encourage you to read his column. Go to his website, jasonzweig.com. Really, really good writer. In fact, one of the books that we love of his is Your Money and Your Brain, just talking about the behavior, our human behavior mixed in with all of these financial emotions and decisions that we have. And so really insightful. One of his most recent writings, I'll just read a small portion of this, but he's really a good writer, funny writer, and entertaining, and kind of puts things in perspective on the financial front. But basically he says, and I'll just read this, it's from an article, September 1st, 2022. The title of the article is "The Stocks and Socks Analogy" by Jason Zweig. He says, the biggest issue facing most investors is the letter T. If you take the T out of stocks, you're left with socks. They have almost nothing in common. Socks, you buy them when you need them. Stocks, you buy them when other people want them. Socks, you buy them whenever they go on sale. Stocks, you buy them whenever they are not on sale. Socks, you keep them for years. Stocks, you sell them as soon as possible. Socks, if they develop holes, you save them in a rag bag. Stocks, if they go down in price, you panic. Would you ever pay $500 or $1,000 for a pair of socks without asking how they could possibly be worth that much? Would you be upset if socks were selling at 50% off? Of course not. But when it's stocks instead of socks, people make these mistakes all the time. And that is from Your Money, Your Brain by Jason Zweig, his book. So interesting little, almost a poem, if you will. But again, encourage you to read his column at Wall Street Journal. Check him out. Just really puts a great perspective on things at times. So let's get into our author today, and that is Jack Stewart. And I'll read his bio. And basically, you go to jackstewartbooks.com. And it's actually a very entertaining website. So Jack, first of all, we've known Jack for a while, but Jack grew up in Seattle, Washington, graduated from the Naval Academy. He served 23 years as a naval aviator fighter pilot. During that time, he flew combat missions from 3 different aircraft carriers and deployed to Afghanistan as a member of an Air Force tactical air control party. His last deployment was with a Joint Special Operations Counterterrorism Task Force in Africa. He's a graduate of the Naval Fighter Weapons School, Top Gun, holds a Master of Science in Global Leadership from the University of San Diego. He's also an airline pilot with a major airline and has appeared as a military and commercial aviation expert on international cable news. He lives in Dallas, Texas with his wife and three kids. So again, Jack is a great writer. We'll talk about his journey to the books that he's written. And it's a fascinating journey starting back in 2020 and COVID when he just said, hey, I'm going to pursue this lifelong dream I've had of being an author. And so now he has 5 books published out. I think I got that number right, but he has what's called the Battleborn series. And that starts with Unknown Rider. And then I'm holding that up here. If you're on YouTube anyway, Jack Stewart, Unknown Rider. That's his first one in the series. Jack Stewart, the next one is Outlaw, and then Bogey Spades, Declared Hostile is the 4th book in that series. And as he expresses in the podcast, one of his favorite, most meaningful books he just released is called, he co-wrote with Chad Robichaud, and that's called Silent Horizons. So really neat books, great reviews. Go to the jackstewartbooks.com website. It is really entertaining. And in fact, I laughed a lot at his Top Gun True or False section of the website. So it's a lot of fun. Go there. He talks about going through the Top Gun training as he's quoting all the Top Gun quotes. I'll just read you one part of the website, but he says, he's kind of talking about his journey. He says, not even 10 years old, I saw a documentary that introduced me to a world where the skies were filled with Tomcats and Skyhawks, flown by pilots with names like Maverick, Iceman, Viper, and Jester. It was May 1986 when I found my calling. And yes, I know Top Gun isn't a documentary, but it might as well be. So he goes on to talk about that, how he got interested in flying. And again, just really fun read if you want to check that out. So without further ado, we are super grateful to have Jack Stewart on the show today, and we hope you enjoy it like we did. Jack, thanks so much, man, for joining us, taking the time today to join us on the Pilot Money Guys. We appreciate it. Thanks for showing up, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always looking for an opportunity to talk money, flying, books, yes. Whatever,
All the above. And you do all the above. Kevin thought you were 70. We were looking at your bio.
Well, yeah, I said, how could a fairly young guy have done all this stuff? So, we'll get into that, though. It's kind of crazy. And then how does a person who's a Top Gun pilot, fighter pilot, ever become an author? So there's lots to figure out here, Jack.
Yeah, well, I'll let you know when I figure that one out.
Absolutely, yeah. But Jack, I mean, obviously, you've done some pretty cool stuff, and I think it's really neat for our pilot audience to go, hey, there's kind of one of us airline dudes / former military guys doing some pretty special things. And so I think that is really cool. And we've gotten, Kevin and I have gotten to see you on this journey as well, kind of go through this and check in with you every once in a while and go, man, how's it going? And so it's kind of cool to see that path that you've been on. But we talked already about, hey, you're Navy fighter pilot, Top Gun school, Naval Academy guy, all that stuff. All that stuff was good, except you're in the Navy. That's the problem, But anyway,
we all have our weaknesses,
as the Air Force guy says. But anyway, so man, it's awesome. But airlines, and now you said that's not enough. We're gonna write some books. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I think when I retired from the reserves a couple years ago, I just said, you know what? I've got way too much time on my hands. I'm spending too much time in the pool drinking daiquiris. So let me do something else. Yeah. But no, seriously, I mean, it's, being a writer, being a published author has always been a dream of mine since I was a little kid. And so, I think like a lot of us, when COVID happened, we had a lot of free time on our hands. And I just took that opportunity and said, you know what, I'm going to try to actually do what I said I would do one day, make one day become today. And so sat down and finished my first book. And then, once the first one was done, you realize, man, it's not that daunting. You can actually write it, So, I wrote a lot more after that. And here I am now. It's an actual job with deadlines and stuff.
I'm sorry to hear that part for sure.
It takes all the fun out of it, huh?
Well, not all the fun. I mean, maybe like 80% of it.
So did you write a book before you got the series? The current series is called the Battleborn series, or the one you're finishing up anyway.
Yeah.
Did you already had you already written a book before you signed a deal for that, or how does that work, Jack?
Yeah. So, like I said, the common joke among writers is that you have your entire life to write your first book, and then you've got 1 year or whatever to write the next. And for me, it ended up being a lot less. But my first book, I finished it during, like I said, during COVID, and I went to try to find an agent and couldn't. No one was really interested in it, and I was like, okay, well, I'll write another one. And so I did that for about five books before I finally got an agent. And looking back on them now, they're all trash. I mean, I don't think they'll ever get published. Maybe one of them, but what happened was I met my agent at a conference in Nashville, and I had written a book called Pony Up, and it actually has the same characters that are in the Battleborn series, so Colt Bancroft and Punky King, but they were different characters, same names, same basic personalities, but they were different. It was a totally different environment. And he read the first chapter and he said, "I love it, except it takes place in Africa. Can it take place in the United States?" And I'm like, well, I mean, they're hunting Al-Shabaab terrorists. I don't know how that can fit like in California or something. So I said, well, I don't know. I'll look at it. And he goes, okay, well, let me read the whole thing. So I sent it to him. Didn't hear from him for 6 months. And then another agent who I had, pitched offered me representation. Well, he still had the manuscript. And so I called him up and I said, hey, are you still interested? And he said, yeah, I really like it. It's very authentic. But it's just not quite right. Do you have anything else that you've written? And I said, okay, yeah. So I sent him another one that I'd written in the meantime. And then I sent him the first chapter of what became Unknown Rider, which is the first book in my Battleborn series. He read that first chapter and he said, this is it. This is going to be your first book. When can you have it done? And I was like, I don't know, 3 months. And he goes, all right, we'll see you later. I'm like,
Wow.
So, so he signed me on an unfinished book, and then I finished it. He had me rewrite it twice, and then he went and sold it in a 4-book deal, and then it was off to the races. Everything else was, deadlines, and
Wow.
more deadlines.
Oh, Jack, I'll tell you, I hate when people fanboy, when people come on their shows, but that means I'm about to fanboy you. And
I like it. I like it. Bring it on.
I'll just say, so many of our pilot clients, they're realtors, they're, landscapers.
Not there's anything wrong with that.
No, not that there's anything wrong with any of that. I mean, they just do
financial advisors. I mean,
financial. Yeah, there you go. That was good. Yeah, financial advisors. But so when I heard you were writing books, I've read probably 5 or 6 books from other pilots, and some of them are pretty good. But the first chapter, I was like, shit. This is for real. and then that's when I went and searched a little bit more about you. So I'll tell our audience that the books are really, really tremendous, and I really enjoyed them. So when I finished the third one, I immediately texted Charlie and said, we got to get Jack Stewart on the podcast. And he texted me back and said, we'll see. And I said, no, we really have to get him on the podcast. So anyway, that's my fanboying for a minute there, Charlie.
Oh man, I appreciate it. You want to go longer? I got time.
More, tell me more. Excellent. Well, Jack, you mentioned something in there like I'd always wanted, it's 2020. I'd always wanted to have a published book. Like, why? It's interesting. Like, where did that come from? Because that thought, I don't know that thought's ever crossed my mind, but where did that come from?
I mean, I was always a reader growing up. My parents were weird. They dropped me off at the library, and that was like where I was going to waste my time. No, I didn't go to the mall. I didn't go to the arcade. I went to the library. And so, I'd just look through all the books. And the cool thing is anything you'd ever want to know, if it was space, it was undersea, anything, it's in the library. And so I just found it to be like, the whole world opened up. And so I read everything I could get my hands on any topic. And then, of course, I started getting into fiction and started reading, Tom Clancy at a very early age, and a bunch of other, fantastic authors that kind of defined my, my writing style. But I said, one day I'm going to do this. I found the publishing world fascinating, like getting an agent, and like going to New York to the big publishing houses. And so, but it was always one of those, one day in the future, And so, I had my whole career in the military. I wrote, but it wasn't anything serious. It just kind of jotting things down, messing around. I was an English major at the Naval Academy, but not because I wanted to be a writer, because it was the easiest path to being a pilot. And so, yeah, it just, once COVID happened, I just like, well, why not make one day today?
Yeah, and I was really quite shocked today in preparation for our podcast. Tom Clancy, kind of a hero in our family. My dad turned me on to him when I was, I don't know, 14, 15, something like that. And I just told Charlie, I looked up Tom Clancy. First of all, he died at age 66, which is way too early.
Yeah.
But the other part that was shocking to me is I thought he was former military.
No.
And he turned out to be an insurance salesperson.
Yeah.
That just loved to talk to people, I guess, in the military and research.
He would have been a great spy, because the stuff that he uncovered, this before the internet. I mean, like, it's amazing the kind of knowledge this guy had. And I don't know if you know, but like at one point, the CIA, I think it was the CIA, actually went after him and thought that he was, getting information through unscrupulous methods, we'll call it. And so they kind of went after him, and yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, Tom Clancy, I did get one quote, and then I wanted to ask you a follow-up question with the Clancy quote. He said, I've made up stuff that turned out to be real. That's the spooky part. So how do you deal with stuff that's either top secret or what is probable, what is possible, and then what is science fiction? I mean, how do you decide which of these things to put in your books? How do you think through that?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I write to entertain. And so, there's a lot of, real things, real technology that we have in the military that I think is really cool and people would love to know about it, but I'm not going to share that with them because I don't want to give away our secrets. So a lot of times I will make up things, and then I'll talk to some of my friends that are maybe still in the military or in the know, and they said, yeah, that's not that, far-fetched. Like Unknown Rider, for instance, is about the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, and I thought that it would be really cool to look at some of the advanced technology that it has and have the Chinese figure out a way of hacking into it, because that's everything we're talking about today, like with TikTok and how it's banned and now it's not banned, and the stuff that the Chinese are into is pretty fascinating. And I don't think it's that far-fetched to think that they could figure out a way of getting into some of these more advanced fighters. And so I wrote this completely fictional. I have no knowledge whatsoever. And then I went to Tailhook a couple of years ago, and one of my former squadron commanders, he worked for Lockheed on the JSF program, and I was telling him about it, and he goes, yeah, that could happen. I was like, wait a second, what? So, yeah, I mean, as far as like giving up secrets go, like I try to stay well clear of anything that I know is classified, and then I will have people who are still in read it and say, hey, make sure I'm not touching on anything that's classified, because I don't want to give up any of our tactics, techniques, or procedures to the bad guys.
It was probably easier for Tom Clancy because he really didn't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Just making stuff up. But that's a good question, Kevin, because when you do know, you gotta be careful of those lines. But Jack, like I remember talking to you a couple of times as you're writing, and the feeling I got, and I'm, it's just like, man, this process can be gut wrenching. Here you are writing something out, somebody's either rejecting it or saying it's redo it, rewrite it. What's that process like for you as you're, pouring your heart and soul into some project and somebody's like, that's crap?
Yeah, well, it's you got to have a thick skin. So the good news, coming from the Navy fighter community, I developed a pretty thick skin over my career. I didn't realize how much I needed it, but also, the mental health aspect of being a writer is another thing that I kind of took for granted. Because writing is a very isolating thing. You sit by yourself in a world that only you know about, and you pour your heart and soul into it. And then you have to step out into the real world and engage with your family and your friends. They don't realize what's going on in your world, that you've created. And it's a joke in our house, but my wife, Sarah, can usually tell when I've gotten feedback from an editor, because I'm either really happy or I'm just pissed off and grumpy. And it takes me about a week. If I'm pissed off, it takes me about a week to kind of, accept it. The editor isn't an idiot. he kind of does know what he's talking about. Let me listen to him and then go back into it and rework things. But yeah, it's there's some highs and there's some lows, but in general, it's, you know, I love it. What I really love is after I've published a book and I hear back from readers, they send me emails, you know, they comment on my social media, whatever, and they'll tell me something that means something to them. Like, hey, I really enjoyed this because of this reason. And so that means a lot to me.
Well, it's to me, you know, reading these kind of books, and again, I was a huge Clancy fan when I was a kid, as well as Connolly and Grisham and a few other writers. There's different styles of writing that goes in. Your books in particular, I like because you kind of drop in on the characters and you see what they're doing, and then you go to a different character, they're doing something different. Sometimes they're doing them at the same time. Sometimes it's later on. But as far as that writing style, you know, what is that writing style? I don't even know how you would classify that.
A voyeurism? I don't know. I mean, I don't really have
Snooping around.
Yeah, exactly. I don't really have a name for it, or I don't even know if there's anything been said about it before. But it's something that I kind of when I watch a movie, you know, that's the way I see a book in my head as a movie. So I like those short scenes, you know, where you see a certain, you know, piece of action or a set piece that moves the story forward, and then you jump to another scene. Maybe you jump to another good guy, you jump to another bad guy. But each scene is building on the last one and is building into the next one. And so that's kind of the way I write. I think about my story cinematically, and then I try to write it as if I'm watching a movie.
So Unknown Rider, you introduce a couple characters. So how do you come up with a character as a writer? Or are these people you knew? Are these can you disclose that, or how did you come up with them?
No, they're not any one particular person. Colt Bancroft, who's my main character, he is a Navy fighter pilot. I think he is what I wish I was when I was in the Navy. He's a little bit, you know, he's got a little maverick attitude, so he's kind of like, you know, Tom Cruise and Top Gun a little bit. He's he just kind of throws the book out the window and just does what he needs to do to get the mission accomplished. And so I kind of like that. He's not worried about the politics, you know, he just all gung ho, you know. And so I wrote him, you know, it's kind of like, that's who I wish I was when I was serving. And I knew people like him, but I think none of my characters are based on one particular person. I think some characters are a conglomeration of several people I've met in real life, both positive and negative. And so, but for, you know, for their sake, I changed the identities, used different names. But yeah, there's, you know, I think in that series in particular, I wanted to do two things. Like, one, I wanted to honor the men and women that I served with. So whether it be an officer, whether it be enlisted, somebody from the intelligence community, I wanted to represent them in a positive light. I wanted to show how hard our, you know, our military men and women work to secure our freedoms and protect us. And so I really kind of wrote it as a tribute to them. And then it gets a little bit more personal in a later series that I've got coming out later this year.
You know, do you feel like
I thought Colt reminded me of Charlie.
Yeah,
really, you know, the hero. So back to you, yes. Godfather.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sure. But Jack, does it feel like you've got just, do you have to work, you know, to come up with these new ideas, or it's just like, hey, I've got more, you know what I mean? Is that, it seems like, you know, you hear people getting writer's block, but it sounds like you've got tons of ideas and kind of ready to roll for the next series. Is that what it's kind of like?
Yes and no. I think, in order to come up with a really good story, something that I think will appeal to a broad audience, that takes some time. And I really have to kind of, you know, dedicate some time to kind of polish the idea out. But the way I work, a lot of people will outline stories from start to finish. And I don't work that way. I can't, because I think it takes away some of the creativity. And I also like my characters to do things that will surprise me sometimes and kind of take the story in a whole different direction. And So I will write what, usually a 2 to 4 page narrative summary of what I think the story is. And I put some time into that. And then once I have that written, then when I start writing, it'll change and the story will drift. But it generally comes back to the same, you know, the same idea that I had set out with. So just maybe the path is a little bit different. And yeah, so that's a big difference between writers. They call them pantsers and plotters. The plotters are the ones that, will write a very detailed outline, chapter by chapter almost. And then you've got pantsers, people who write by the seat of their pants. And that's kind of what I more adhere to. I like to, allow the creative process to work.
And I'm sure as you write, you find yourself getting better and better, just like any other skill, I would assume, right? It kind of clearly, I think to me, there's a gift there in your brain that allows that creativity, attention to detail, and it's entertaining. But the discipline probably, you can improve upon that, I would guess, as you write.
Yeah. And I'm still improving. I think, every time I set out to write a new book, I always try to push the limits of my abilities. I want to do something new every time. But the general mechanics of storytelling for me, I think, they're pretty well structured. I mean, you have depending on what scholars you talk to, you have a 3-act structure, you have this, you have that. Again, I adhere more to the Hollywood way of telling a story. And so you have different beats, you have highs and lows throughout the entire book. And as a reader, one of my pet peeves is when an author just has nonstop action, page after page after page after page, and you never get a chance to catch your breath. So I like to have brief lulls where the reader can kind of process what happened and kind of get ready for the next round of action. And I think those are the things that I'm improving upon every single time, figuring out how to lead the reader down the story in an entertaining way that doesn't leave them breathless and exhausted.
So there is so much on TV now. There's 17 different streaming channels. There's all this stuff that's out there, a lot of creativity. But it seems to me that a lot of times they'll make stories that you just kind of know what's going to happen, and then it does happen. And it's so. Do you have any fear about having your stories be like uninteresting? I mean,
oh yeah.
How do you think? Yeah. So how do you get feedback, or how do you find out like if your story surprised somebody?
I have a few people that will read my books early on, and I'll finish the first draft and I'll send it to them, and I'll get their honest feedback. I think I've got like 3 or 4 people, my wife being one. I have some people I serve with in the military, a couple of people that I fly with at the airline that will read it and they will give me honest feedback and say, like, I was really surprised, or yeah, I kind of knew that. And I'll be like, wait, you kind of knew that? How'd you know that? And because if it's a twist, I want to lay the breadcrumbs, if you will, so that someone can figure it out, but I don't want it to be easy to figure out, And then sometimes, like for instance, in Outlaw, my second book, I wrote the book and I was really happy with probably the first 2/3 of it. And I was like, well, I got a deadline. I'm just going to turn it in and let the editor tell me what he thinks. And he wrote back and said, I really liked the middle. The middle third was awesome, but the beginning and the ending sucked. I was like, whoa, the beginning sucked too. Wait a second, what? And so that's one of those times when I was grumpy and pissed off, and I was trying to figure out how I'm going to fix this. And I remember I was standing in front of my sink in my bathroom, shaving, getting ready to put on my uniform and go to work. And I asked myself, what if this specific character was a bad person and not a good person? And then I started thinking about it. I was like, oh, wait a second, that could work. And all day long while I was flying, I was thinking, okay, does that fit for what a bad guy would do and a good guy? So like, can it go either way? And I realized that I only needed to change one little thing at the end of the book to make that character go from being a good guy to a bad guy. And that would be a really good twist. And so that's what I ended up doing. And it surprised a lot of people. Most people who've read it were like, didn't see that coming. And that's, to me, the best, feedback I can get.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming either. but I don't really see anything coming, right, Charlie? So maybe I'm not a good litmus test there.
Yeah.
But the third book, you really got me at the end of the third book. But so it looked like the first two books were their own story. The third book looks like it's kind of part of a two-book series. Am I right about that? And have you finished? What's the last one? Declared Hostile?
Declared Hostile. Declared Hostile is book 4, and I purposely wanted to leave book 3 on a cliffhanger that's going to set up book 4. But one thing that I really appreciate about certain storytellers that I grew up on is that they tie all their books together. So they're standalone. You have a definitive beginning, middle, and end to each book, but they tie back to previous books in this series so that if you've been on the journey since book 1, you're going to go, oh, that's who that is, or oh, I remember that guy. And so book 4 is going to tie a lot of things together. And I think a lot of the unanswered questions from the first 3 books are going to be resolved in book 4. So I'm really excited about that one.
Cool. So even though I'm a fanboy, I would like to say that the books on Audible are phenomenal because you have some guy reading that's I don't know. I think he's the guy that reads all these types of books, right? I mean, he's really what's his name?
Ray Porter.
Ray Porter. Yeah. Ray Porter. Wow, really good.
He is one of the, if not the best narrator. I think, especially for this genre of books. He narrates Jack Carr's books. He narrates Andy Weir. I mean, there's a ton of guys out there, and he's phenomenal.
So if you like Tom Clancy, if you like thriller books, for me, it was kind of like, Tom Clancy, loved the books. I love submarines after reading all those books, loved all the technology. But I went back and reread all those books a couple of years ago, and it's all the stuff against the Soviets from the 80s. I think it was 80s and 90s, maybe.
Yep.
But your books come into a new technology, stealth, and all this other stuff that's going on today. So if you're a Clancy fan, I absolutely recommend that you guys check out his books, not because he's a pilot, not because he's in front of us right now, but because the books kick ass. So, and your last book is coming out, what did you say, in May?
So Declared Hostile comes out in August. In May, I have the first book in a new series that's coming out called Silent Horizons.
All right, so let's get to that. But it's also on Spotify. It's also where else is it available?
Yeah, I mean, all the Amazon's typical for print, ebook, audiobook. You can get the audio on Apple Books, maybe. You can get it on Spotify. There's a few other audiobook places. Some bookstores are carrying this series. Barnes and Noble is one of them. Who else? Books A Million. There's a few other places.
Yeah, terrific. So, and we're Jack graciously offered. Actually, we asked him to offer it to send some signed books out to the first 10 people that reach out to us and say, "I'd like to read a Jack Stewart book." So, Charlie, I don't know how we make that happen. But
just send email Kevin@leadingedgeplanning.com or Charlie@leadingedgeplanning.com. We'll make it happen. And Jack, you mentioned that one coming out in May was kind of significant for you. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So, like I said, I got the 4-book deal. I had to write a book every 6 months to meet the deadlines. And then at around the same time, after signing that contract, I was approached by a friend of mine who's now writing for the Tom Clancy estate. His name's Jeff Wilson. And he said, "Hey, have you ever considered co-writing with somebody?" And I said, "No, but I would." And he goes, "Okay, do you know a guy named Chad Robichaux?" And I was like, "I have no idea who this guy is." So I looked him up, and Chad Robichaux was a Force Recon Marine, and he did some stuff with the same JSOC task force that I was a part of and did what's called Advanced Force Operations. After he left the military, he was a professional MMA fighter, and then he struggled with PTSD and ended up starting a foundation called Mighty Oaks. And Mighty Oaks helps veterans who struggle with PTSD and does it from a faith-based approach. And so I was like, wow, I really like what this guy is doing. Let me talk to him. So we had a phone call, and he was really looking for a ghostwriter, like somebody that could, write the story. His name would be on the cover. And I was like, I really like what you're doing. I really want to draw awareness to Mighty Oaks and to your work but I'm also trying to get my career going. And so I would really appreciate it if we could co-write this together. And he thought about it and he came back and said, yeah, let's do it. So I wrote a proposal and we worked on that and sent it out to a couple places. And Tyndale, which is a Christian publisher, picked it up in a 3-book series. And when we wrote this story, we picked character names for people that we served with who were important to us. So, for instance, all of our kids' names are in there. I've got my boys, Trey and Will, are Navy SEALs in the book. My daughter Rebecca is the main character's wife, and then Chad has Hunter and Hayden are also Navy SEAls. Those are his sons, and then Haley is the daughter in the book. And so those were very important to us. But also the main character's name is Foster Quinn, and Foster was based on a Marine Force Recon guy that Chad had served with who passed away. And he takes an assumed last name, Cottle, and that was also one of his friends. And then 2 other SEAL characters were named after 2 SEALs that I served with. One at the Naval Academy, we were classmates, Seth Stone, and I got his bracelet on here, but he passed away a few years back, so he's a character. And then a SEAL that I served with downrange, whose name was Ryan Owens, and so he's a character in the book as well. And so it really became very special to us in that, we were honoring those people, but more importantly, we were honoring every other person that we served with in that capacity. And what's so special about it is that we're doing it to really draw attention to some struggles that veterans might be having, especially those that came from the special operations community when they come back and they're struggling with PTSD or whatever, and they really don't know what to do. Yeah, so it's really important that we weren't beating people over the head with Christianity and saying like, hey, if you turn to Jesus, you're going to be okay. It's really acknowledging the fact that a lot of people who went downrange really struggled with their faith and maybe felt like they were lost, didn't really know what their beliefs were, and that's okay. And that's our main character in our book has those same struggles. And so ideally somebody that would pick this book up might be somebody that's struggling with it and actually can relate to him, Yeah. And so it's not a parochial book at all. I think it's a really good action thriller, but it's one that has meaning.
And is it a series or is it a standalone book? And can you tell us the name again?
Yeah. So the first book is Silent Horizons, and it's part of the Silent Horizons series. Right now we have a 3-book contract. The first one will come out this May, and then usually I think every May or June for the next 2 years. The second book is already written and getting ready to edit it. And then I just finished up the outline and kind of, narrative summary for book 3, and I'll get started on that one pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. As we near our time today, Jack, I'm just kind of thinking, man, you got big visions, and you're busy, dude. You got a lot going on.
Yeah.
But what's are you just going to continue writing books? Anything on your mind as far as like some of these books would make great movies? You probably thought about that. But
I have, yeah.
What's that world look like?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, I had a Hollywood agent that was getting ready to shop Unknown Rider around to some studios, and then they announced Top Gun 3 was going to be made. And so she's like, yeah, I don't think there's going to be studios that are going to be going for another big jet kind of movie. And so I was like, okay, whatever, put that on the back burner. But I do have, some people who have reached out to me about, wanting to have some meetings and possibly see it on the big screen or on TV or something. Silent Horizons, I know we've had some talks with studios for, Amazon or Netflix. Yeah. And so I think that one could potentially be a series. But I think there's a reality TV show that's going to be filming here later this year called Shadow Figures, where they're going to take some people with spec ops backgrounds and take a look at conspiracy theories to either prove or disprove them. And they asked me to come and be an aviation expert. And I don't know if that's going to involve me flying an airplane or jumping out of an airplane, but there's going to be some fun stuff.
Either one would be fun, right?
Yeah, the flying one would be more fun for me. I'll probably, cry like a girl if I jump out of an airplane.
You said reality TV. I was like, that sounds. And then when you said the spec ops people, then I was like, all right.
Yeah.
All right. That sounds pretty cool. That sounds pretty cool. So Charlie and I like to talk a lot about trying to live a successful life and balance all these things. What have you had to give up, or what are you glad you've had to give up, and what other items in your life are challenging for you right now?
I mean, balance is key. I mean, that's I'd say last year, last year around June, it kind of ended a 18-month stretch of where I had to do nothing but write just because of all the deadlines I had. And at the end of it, I was like, okay, I am not doing that again. So I need to be more cautious about saying yes to things. Because that was, advice I had received from some of my author friends is we just don't say no. We don't say no to anything. And I'm like, nope, sometimes you need to say no. And I've learned that. So yeah, it's, in the reserves, in the Navy reserves, there was a joke that we had that, you've got your wife, you've got your civilian employer, and you've got the Navy. And if two of the three are not upset with you, then you're doing it wrong. And so I was like, okay. So, looking at it now, I've got publishers, I've got my civilian employer, and I've got my wife, and I'm trying to keep at least two of the three happy. And that's a challenge.
So what do you do when there's double time available, Jack?
It depends. Is it somewhere I want to go? Do I have to de-ice? These are all the questions I have to ask myself now.
That's right. Do you get to write? Are there times to write on the road? You probably look at that, right? Overnight.
Yeah. If it's a long enough overnight, there's a lot of places I
there you go.
Love going down to the bar with my laptop, getting a beer, and doing some writing there.
Well, awesome, Jack. I mean, thanks again for doing this. We appreciate it. Anything else on your mind you want to share or get out there? Any thoughts?
No, just if you read my book, take a picture, post it on social media, tag me in it, leave me a review. The more word that gets out there is always helpful.
Excellent.
So, Jack, we usually give all of our guests an honorary call sign, and Charlie told me we're not allowed to do that with you. So, if you can just tell us what is your call sign?
My call sign is Farley, like Chris Farley, and I can't really tell you why. There is a reason, but it's not really for this audience. But I knew it was time for me to retire from the Navy when some of the young sailors said, "Why is your call sign Farley, sir?" And I'm like Chris Farley, and they said, "Who?" I'm like, okay,
that's sad. That's sad.
Yeah. He went way too early.
He's another one that did.
Yeah, he's another one.
Absolutely. Well, Jack, so help me again. How do people reach you on Instagram? I don't even know how to go to Instagram. Give us the address and all that kind of stuff.
So Instagram, it's Jack Stewart Books, and on X, it's Jack Stewart Book because with an S would be too long. And then my website is jackstewartbooks.com. And you can go to my website and sign up for my newsletter and or send me an email, and I get back to everyone that writes me and reaches out. So, yeah.
So, Jack, a final question that Charlie always wants to ask: if he was in an F-16 and you were in an F-18, who do you think would win?
I mean, me, obviously.
Obviously.
He doesn't.
Obviously.
That's right.
Just look at us.
That's what I was thinking too, Jack, to be honest. But anyway.
Yeah. You wouldn't be a good fighter pilot if you weren't a little bit cocky, right?
Absolutely right. I do remember the first time I fought an F-18, though, it was shocking. The angle of attack was alarming. And I was warned about it, but it'll get your attention. But
yeah. I remember fighting an F-16 one time. This is when I was based in Beaufort, South Carolina. And so we debriefed over the phone. And during the fight, he had the superior thrust to weight ratio. And so he's going up and I'm just pointing at him, but I was falling out of the sky. And so we get on the phone. And he's like, how are you doing that? You were still pointing at me. And I was like, oh, dude, I was falling. Like there's nothing I could do other than just keep my nose pointed at you and shoot at you. That's it.
That was probably me, Jack. We fought the guys out of Beaufort all the time.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget the best quote from the Navy guy out of Beaufort, probably you. I call him, I get back to Shaw, I call him up, hey, we got to debrief this thing. And he's like, why would you want to ruin a good sortie with a debrief? And I was like, sweet. I like that.
Yeah, I think that was me.
Because we all thought it. I know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, Jack. Thank you so much,
Jack.
man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Pilot Money Guys podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen. We are grateful for your reviews because they encourage others to listen in. Visit leadingedgeplanning.com to learn more and subscribe to our newsletter. Leading Edge Financial Planning, LLC, LEFP, is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where LEFP and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. For additional information, please visit our website at www.leadingedgeplanning.com. The information provided is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, and it should not be relied on as such. It should not be considered a solicitation to buy or an offer to sell a security. It does not take into account any investor's particular investment objectives, strategies, tax status, or investment horizon. You should consult your attorney or tax advisor. The views expressed in this commentary are subject to change based on market and other conditions. These documents may contain certain statements that may be deemed forward-looking statements. Please note that any such statements are not guarantees of any future performance, and actual results or developments may differ materially from those projected. Any projections, market outlooks, or estimates are based upon certain assumptions and should not be construed as indicative of actual events that will occur. All information has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but its accuracy is not guaranteed. There is no representation or warranty as to the current accuracy, reliability, or completeness of, nor liability for, decisions based on such information, and it should not be relied on as such.